Good day, everybody. I hope that you're well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English Language Arts, grade 8. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of adjectives and adverbs. All right. So our chapter is adjectives and adverbs. Our subject is English language arts. Our grade 8. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on is to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? All right. So when it comes to an adjective, right? An adjective, it describes the noun or it modifies the noun or the pronoun, right? So an adjective is a word that either describes the noun or it modifies the noun or the pronoun. And an example of an adjective, right? Or before we go to an adjective, we can say firstly an adjective. It is a word that either describes or modifies a noun or it modifies or describes a pronoun. And adjectives, they often tell you what kind or they will tell you how many. And if we look at an example of we're doing grade 8, or are you talking about maths for grade 6? Because for English we're doing for English we're doing grade 8. So are you asking about the maths? All right, so adjectives, right? If we look at examples of an adjective, it says, the apples were delicious. So the apples were delicious, which means that it is either describing or it modifies apples, right? So you need to ask yourself, what kind of apples were they, right? So we can say they were delicious apples. And that is why we say with when it comes to adjectives, then it often tells us either what kind or it can tell us how many. So once again, we said we have adjectives, and adjectives is a word that describes a noun or pronoun, or it modifies a noun or pronoun. And adjectives, it often tells us what kind, or adjectives tell us how many. And we made an example of the apples were delicious, and adjectives, they tell us what kind of apples they were, or the adjective tells us what kind of apples they were. So, which means that they were delicious apples. If we look at another example of an adjective, we can even say, the girl wore a red dress, right? Which means that we are actually describing the dress. So, what color or what kind of dress? We can say it's a red dress that she had on, or a flowery dress, or a beautiful dress, or the beautiful girl, right? So, you basically describe the noun or the pronoun by stating either what kind or how many. Then we have adverbs, and an adverb is a word that either describes or modifies a verb. It either modifies an adjective or it even modifies another adverb. And adverbs often tell us how, they tell us when, where, and they even tell us to what extent or what degree. And if we look at an example, it says Grace ran really quickly. So Grace ran really quickly. And if we were to look or identify our adverb within that sentence, then the question would be, how quickly did Grace run? And the answer would be really, right? So really is our adverb that tells us how quickly Grace ran. And they say that most adverbs, right, that tells us how. So most of our adverbs that tells us how, they end in ly. Like for example, quickly, hurriedly, sadly, right? And they basically tell us how. And you can't always just use ly to tell whether a word is an adverb or an adjective, right? And then we have another word with an adverb that says she arrives soon. You see, so it's not just saying ly all the time. She arrives soon. And soon is an adverb that doesn't end in ly. And then also Fred has a friendly dog. And as you can see, friendly dog, it basically describes the dog because it tells us what kind of dog, which means that that is an adjective, not an adverb. All right. So now we're going to aplusstudents.ca, where we are going to choose between our adjectives and adverbs. And we're going to say, is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? All right. So we said that an adjective is a word that describes or modifies a noun or pronoun. And we also said that when it comes to adjectives will tell us either what kind or they will tell us how many. And then we have an adverb, and an adverb is a word that describes or modifies the verb. It describes an adjective or another adverb. And adverbs, they often tell us how, it tells us when, where, or to what extent, and even to what degree. All right. And we see, especially when it comes to adjectives that tells us how, right? It basically ends in ly because it either tells us how something is being done, it's either being done really quickly, hurriedly, right? And not all adjectives that end in adverbs that end in ly, or words that end in ly is an adverb, because words that also end in ly can be adjectives, right? Like when we describe the friendly dog, right? And when we describe the dog as being friendly, then it means that we are either describing the dog as being friendly. What kind of dog? A friendly dog. And that is not an adverb, it's an adjective. All right. So now we're going to look at an activity and then we're going to our test. It says we need to choose the word that best describes or modifies the verb, meaning we need to choose the adverb. It says after becoming famous for her best-selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be again. So we now need to choose a word that best, or we need to choose a word that best describes and modifies a verb. All right. And if we were to choose our correct word that best describes or modifies the verb, and then we could say that after becoming famous for a best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would be normal again. So, normal again. And that is a word that modifies. It modifies the adjective. Because you see, the word normal is an adjective. And if we were to use the word normally, then it would be an adverb. All right, the next one says Elena thought for a moment and then responded. We must choose the correct word. And we can say it responded intelligently. Intelligently to Mrs. Khan's question. So, which means that intelligently is an adverb that ends in ly, and intelligent would be an adjective. All right. So intelligently is our adverb, whereas if we were to use the word intelligent, then intelligent would be our adjective, right? And remember that is why we said not all not all adverbs end in ly, right? All right. Julie's gorgeous bearded gown was handmade by her niece. So we're going to say was entirely, and this is our adverb. Because if we were to say entire, then that would have been our adjective, right? All right, so now we're going to our test, where we are going to choose between an adjective and we're going to choose between an adverb. It says Mr. and Mrs. Burton, do we say recently purchased a cottage on Lake Michigan, or do we say recent purchased a cottage on Lake Michigan? We need to choose the correct answer. Do we say they recently purchased a cottage on Lake Michigan, or they recent purchased purchased a cottage on Lake Michigan? Option 1 or option 2? And if we were to choose the correct one, we would say that Mr. and Mrs. Burton recently purchased a cottage on Lake Michigan. Recently. Elena thought for a moment and then she responded. Do we say intelligently or intelligent to Miss Khan's question? And if we were to choose the correct answer, we will say that Elena thought for a moment and then responded intelligently to Mrs. Khan's question. So, intelligently to Mrs. Khan's question. And that is an adverb. The next one says we need to choose the word that best describes or modifies the verb, which means that we are going to choose an adverb. It says Mayor Hurst signed off on the committee's plan to fund the construction of a new bridge. So Mayor Hurst, do we say readily or ready signed off on the committee's plan to fund the construction of a new bridge? So we need to modify the verb, describe the verb. And if we were to choose a word that describes or modifies a verb, we would say the mayor readily signed off on the committee's plan to fund the construction of a new bridge. Oh, ready. So ready, not readily. So we need to choose the word that best describes and modifies the verb. It says Josh and Denise sell their handmade crafts at the bazaar around the county. So Josh and Denise, they sell their handmade crafts at bazaars around the county. Do we say they do it sometimes or occasional? And we can say that Josh and Denise sell their handmade crafts at the bazaar around the county sometimes or occasional, or they occasionally sell this stuff. All right, and the next one says, do we say the courageous or the courageously soldier faced difficult challenges during his service in the military? Do we say the courageous soldier or the courageously soldier faced difficult challenges during his service in the military? And we can say the courageous soldier faced difficult challenges during his service in the military. All right, so after becoming famous for her best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be, do we say normally again or normal again? We need to choose option one or option two. And if we were to choose the correct one, we would say, after becoming famous for her best selling novel, the writer wondered whether her life would ever be normal again. And yes, normal is correct. So well done. Now we need to say, is the word an adjective or if the word is an adverb, right? And remember, we said an adjective is a word that describes or modifies a noun or it modifies a pronoun, right? And adjectives, they often tell us what kind or they will tell us how many, whereas an adverb is a word that describes or modifies a verb or an adjective or another adverb, right? And adverbs, they either tell us how, they tell us when, they tell us where, to what extent, or to what degree. All right. So we're going to look at first two activities and then we are going to go to our test. It says, did you notice how Kendra's writing steadily improved after she signed up for that writer's workshop? So the word steadily, we need to say if that word is an adjective or if it is an adverb. And if we look at that word steadily, then we can say steadily is is an adverb. All right. So now let's go to our test where we are going to either choose or say if the word is an adjective or if the word is an adverb. It says, is the word in bold an adjective or an adverb? It says that my neighbor who unu- who is unusually tall is always cautious around ceiling fans. So my neighbor who is unusually tall is always cautious around ceiling fans. Sorry. Is that an adjective or an adverb? Unusually. The word unusually is an adjective or an adverb. And if we were to choose the correct word, right? Or just if we were to say which word it is, we'll say that word is an adverb. Yes, well done. Unusually is an adverb. Well done. The bald eagle, the Liberty Bell, and the American flag, all considered patriotic symbols of the United States. So the word patriotic, we need to say if that word is an adjective or if that word is an adverb. Patriotic. And if we were to choose the correct answer, then yes, we would say that patriotic is an adjective. So well done, adjective is correct. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on adjective and adverbs. You said an adjective is a word that describes or modifies either a noun or a pronoun. And then we have an adverb, and an adverb describes or modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Adverbs, they tell us how, they tell us where, they tell us when, they tell us to what extent or to what degree. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson, grade 8. Thank you very much for joining the class, and I really hope that you're going to have a good evening further. Goodbye.